Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. This is a prequel to the events of Final Fantasy VII. It follows our protagonist Zack. My first introduction of Zack was actually Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, and at the time I had no idea who this guy was. Zack is a very enthusiastic first-class soldier for the company Shinra. At the very beginning of this game, he's actually second class, but then he gets promoted to first class. But his first mission starts with a first-class soldier that went missing, a man by the name of Genesis. If you're familiar with the Final Fantasy VII series, then you might recognize some characters such as Sephiroth and Aerith and Tifa and Yuffie. It's cool seeing them in a perspective before the events of Final Fantasy VII. And I'm not too familiar with Final Fantasy VII. It was many years ago that I actually played through Final Fantasy VII, and so it's kind of like, yeah, I kind of remember the story, and I kind of remember what these characters are and what they're about. I recognize these characters a lot more from Kingdom Hearts, which obviously isn't canon in the Final Fantasy VII universe. I'm not sure if I would consider this a full Final Fantasy game. If anything, it kind of acts more as an expansion pack, some sort of DLC deal to the Final Fantasy VII remakes. This game initially came out for the PSP, and so I believe that the reunion in this title indicates that it's also a remake. As far as the combat goes, it works kind of like Kingdom Hearts, I guess. It's an action RPG, and so you have your basic attack, but you can also utilize materia in order to do abilities and spells. These take different resources, like your spells are going to take MP, your abilities are going to take action points, and as you accrue new materia, you will access new abilities and spells. You can also fuse materia together in order to unlock new spells and get more powerful stats. And so I actually had a lot of fun leveling up my materia and fusing them together. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about this game is it allows you to experiment and get really powerful with awesome abilities and spells early on in the game. You'll get access to these extra side missions, and they just basically like teleport you to this mini map, and you have to go, your objective is usually just to go kill this main target. And these extra side missions are a great way to gain XP, level up your materia, unlock new equipment, and unlock new powerful materia. And so normally I find myself wanting to stick just to the main game. I don't want to get stuck in the weeds with a bunch of side content, but for this one, for some reason, these side missions really scratched that itch. It really made grinding quick and snappy and obtainable for me. The problem with my desire to do all these side missions is I became very overpowered very quickly. And so basically what I would do is I do all of the side missions that I possibly could do, and then when I'm playing the main story of the game, it was just a cakewalk. I was playing on normal difficulty, mind you, but like I was destroying enemies in one hit because I was just so powerful. And I found a lot of really good materia combinations that synergize well with each other. And so the main game was just a cakewalk for me. In fact, I found myself thinking maybe this is a little too easy at this point, and I was considering bumping the difficulty up a notch, which is something I hardly ever do. It's funny because I'll encounter these bosses that are supposed to be big and scary, and then I'll just shoot like a couple of dark Fyragas at them, and then it's just, they're down for the count. Although sometimes I felt it was a little boring and anticlimactic, the other part of me actually felt a lot of satisfaction. Like all my hard effort grinding on these side missions has made me essentially a god in the main game. And I don't even feel like I did that many side missions. It tells you the completion rate of like how many of these extra missions you've done, and I think by the end of the game I only did about 40% of these side missions, but even by the end of the game, Zack felt incredibly powerful. Maybe the nature of this game is not to be that difficult. Maybe the whole point of this game is to tell the story of the prequel of Final Fantasy VII. I do think that the pacing of this game just felt a little weird. It didn't follow a lot of typical story structure. It's broken up by 10 chapters, and I felt like we would hit the climax, this big eventful moment, and then suddenly we're acting like nothing crazy has happened and we're going about building flower carts or whatever. And I do feel like a lot of the story and the characters went over my head, not being wholly familiar with the events and characters of Final Fantasy VII. So yeah, it is kind of like a full circle story featuring Zack, but I also felt like the main purpose of this game is just to fill in some of the gaps from Final Fantasy VII. I mean, it just doesn't really follow the typical structure of even a Final Fantasy game, because like maybe 3 hours into the game, I already unlocked the Bahamut summon. And summons do work a little different in this game than other games. The whole point of the combat of this game is in the top left corner, you're gonna have this little roulette system that's just going to consistently be going. And there's not really anything you can do to influence that for the majority of the game. But this roulette system kind of reflects Zack's inner emotions and thoughts. And so if you happen to get 3 of the same characters with this roulette system, then you'll be able to do like a special ability that reflects what this character in Zack's mind is all about. There's also 3 numbers, and if you get a certain combination of numbers, they will unlock additional temporary benefits like, oh, your spells don't cost any MP, or your abilities don't cost any AP, or you'll have extra health. And so you can't really manipulate these bonuses, but when they do happen, then suddenly you're like, okay, spells don't cost any MP, and you can just spam all your really strong spells without having to worry about depleting those resources. And this whole roulette system also made the game significantly easier. And this is also how you do summons. You're not able to just trigger summons whenever you want. And so maybe that's why they felt comfortable giving you the like Bahamut summon so early on, is because you can't influence when this thing triggers. But it's always exciting when it does, or when you use like the Odin summon. These summons are very cinematic, very exciting. They also make combat very easy, especially if they do get triggered. Another weird thing about this roulette system is this is actually how your character levels up, and so it's kind of luck-based. Like, you do have an experience pool, but unless you get the 777 roll on this roulette, you're not going to level up. And it's entirely possible for you to get enough experience that once this 7-7 triggers, you'll get 2 levels instead of 1. And it did seem to occur quite frequently. There wasn't any time where I felt underleveled and I was just hoping that this roulette would land on 777. This stuff just kind of happened organically, so I'm not sure how much of this roulette system is luck-based or actually programmed to trigger during certain points. It certainly set the game apart from other Final Fantasy combat systems, though. But yeah, it was getting to the point where I suddenly got annoyed by the damage cap being 9,999, because I was triggering that damage cap maybe 5 or 6 hours into the game, and so suddenly an ability that just says a one-off damage didn't seem as strong as like something that triggered 3 damages at the same time, because I'm doing a lot more damage, surpassing that 9,999 cap. I will say this though, just because of how I built my character, I focused solely on damage. I never really worried about my defenses, and so I was building Zack kind of like a glass cannon. And so when I was doing some more difficult side missions, if I got hit once or twice, I was down for the count, but it was kind of the best defense is a good offense, and so I basically just tried to take down the enemy before they could land any type of hits on me. You do get like a dodge roll and a block. One of my favorite abilities actually would launch me straight up into the air, kind of like a dragoon, and then I'd land down on the ground and do the shockwave, and this ability actually worked really well for dodging enemy attacks and then retaliating. And like I said, it is a shorter game. It took me 13 hours to beat this game, and that's doing, 40% of the side missions. If I wanted to, I could have spent more hours grinding out these side missions. There are a couple things off the beaten path, but for the most part, this game is fairly linear. It just kind of teleports you to the mini-map where you're supposed to go. You can walk around Midgar to some degree, and you can stroll around the slums if you want, but as far as I could tell, there isn't really that much of a point in doing so, other than just checking out the area. And I was playing this game on the Nintendo Switch. I'm sure that the performance would have been much better on the PlayStation 4 or 5, but I actually was pretty impressed with how it ran on the Nintendo Switch. The loading screens were annoying, but visually I thought it looked fine, especially if you were just playing on handheld mode like what I usually ended up doing. I actually think that the short game length time worked in my favor because I don't like to be tied down to these long 50-hour games. Usually that's the case. And so it actually was refreshing playing a Final Fantasy game that was a shorter length because I got to experience that power creep and that power factor without having to invest a ton of time into it. And if I enjoyed the story and the game, then I'm always welcome to hop into the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think I'm going to give this game a 4 out of 5. I've come to appreciate Zack more now that I know what he's all about. It does make me more eager to hop into the Final Fantasy VII remakes, even though they are much more of a time commitment. This is just a short and sweet Final Fantasy game to get your Final Fantasy fix. Well, folks, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!